of transitioning a little bit, we'll move into what is some ways that people have played against you, or some things that have happened to you, story time, in like that would tell you that your opponent is not a good opponent to play against. We mentioned a little bit about like the lack of communication, but in a game, what things have they done, or things that like that flip the switch in your mind of this is not going to be a fun game. This is going to be like I'm putting my foot down now. We're not playing a fun game anymore.
I've got two right off the top of my head that
Go ahead, Ryan.
kill me every time. The unannounced dice rolls. Guy just sits there and literally starts rolling a handful of dice, and then, oh well, nine wounds on that unit. From what? Where's this coming from? What's it? Explanations. I would really like an explanation before you just tell me that my army's dead. I've run into that one a couple of times. A lot of times it's with newer players, but I think we all know certain more experienced players that will jump in and do that and try to run a gotcha on you with it.
Yeah, fast dice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
roll and immediately start picking them up before you can even look and see what the hell they rolled.
Yeah, that too.
So how would you fix fast dice? So, and also, how would you differentiate between the player who just feels stressed that they're under time and are trying to get things done versus the player who's purposely doing that to get away with it? Because I've played some young kids that are just like they're not used to playing in tournaments, and they have that anxiety built up, and they're not trying to just roll behind a building and pick it up and tell me but they are. They're inflicting the bad thing without meaning to.
Right.
Well, if it's somebody that you know you've seen at tournaments and it's obvious they're not new, then that's completely different than, like you were saying, the young kid. You can break them of that habit. Just say, hey, you want to roll those over here so I can see them? But I can't even tell you how many times somebody's tried to do that fast dice stuff, and I just put my hand out before they go and pick up their dice. I'm like, relax. I want to look too. So,
a good way to, because not everybody can know who the top dogs are in the in the format. A good way that I've tested this out is I will literally say, hey, slow down, we got time. And if they immediately relax, I know that they're a new player. But if they don't and look at me like I'm a crazy person, I know that they know what they're doing. And that's when they do that, you step up the conversation and make your demands known, on how you want the game to proceed. And if they still don't do that, well, that's when you call a judge.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's actually a good point. When does the judge call happen? At what level do you get help? Because I personally feel people aren't calling judges enough.
Yeah.
They're letting things get too far. But when do you make that call?
2 strikes.
That's a good way of putting it. It would depend, like you had said, Matt, on the level of the person you're playing. Because, I mean, if you can tell they're just nervous or whatnot,
Yeah.
I'd give them 2 strikes with no problem. But if it's somebody with the semi-pro painted army that perfectly untouched and whatnot, and a million movement trays, and you can tell they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's the point. First time, okay, that's a warning. Second time, nope. Let me go grab a judge real quick because we need to have a conversation right now and head this off. Because I'm not the type of competitive player to where I will sit there and have an argument with another player over how the game's going. I'll go have a conversation with a judge right there and just get it out of the way and if the player continues to be an issue, I'll walk on the game. I have no problem walking away from a game. I don't take it that seriously. If I'm not having fun, I'm not going to stick around.
Yeah, and Shop's Clothes brought up a good point of having refs at tables, but I think the biggest issue I can see with that is that, like at the Michigan GT, there's 60 tables.
Yeah, that's and
Yeah.
Well, at the very least, top five tables.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So, also, we tried to do it at the team tournament, but it didn't flesh out, and we didn't really know what we were doing. But having a anonymous social media line to the judges of like a Facebook group that you could post anonymously to that says, "Hey, go to table 12." Because even from a perspective of outside of the game, but being next to another game where you watch some guy just like yelling at a little kid,
Yeah.
and the kid doesn't know that he has an out, he doesn't know he can play the X card and get a judge, but you could say like, "Hey," to a judge anonymously, just walk by this game, like look at it, because there's something going on here. Because that's how people stop playing the hobby, and that's never cool.
right.
But another something I've found, there's a trick you can get right off the bat. How the person gives you their list at a competition and what that list looks like can be a very key into if they're going to try and pull some stuff during the game or not. And it's
Yeah.
not the end-all be-all. There are great people that will handwrite their list like a chicken running over a piece of scratch paper.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people that will purposely make vague lists and not give them to you until you ask for them
Yeah.
in an attempt to get something over on you. And if they're going to try and get something over on you in the beginning, they're going to try and get something over on you during and at the end of the game. So
Yeah, those people that do that, they will also show resistance when you ask for their codex in the middle of a game. Anytime any player gives you any kind of resistance on that or says, "I didn't bring mine," judge,
Yeah.
judge,
Especially-
judge.
Especially at a major tournament like the Michigan GT, definitely. At a hometown tournament, okay.
Our
If
teams are a little
they're
different.
less than 10 people at the tournament,
yeah,
okay, that's where I start giving a lot of leeway. Especially when they're quarter painted armies that are half undercoat or half base coat. I'll definitely give a lot more leeway when I'm at a tournament that style versus Michigan GT or Adepticon or the Vegas LVO or any of those tournaments.
anything where you're paying not only the ticket to get into the actual competition or a ticket to get into like a game con that event is in, plus nights in a hotel.
Yeah.
You're expecting a little bit more high level, or not high level, but just more consistency.
And,
Yeah.
and I agree with Nurgle Matt brought up a good point. He said like if he has to make an argument out of it, he would rather lose the game. But I think you're doing a disservice not only to yourself but to your opponent, because if you're going to throw a game
Right.
just because your opponent is not a good player, you're pushing that guy up in the rankings to play against somebody else. When he may,
Right.
like if it gets bad enough, he may just not deserve to be there at all.
And I'm petty as hell sometimes. If I'm playing against somebody like that, it's, "Oh, can you show me the rule? Oh, what other things can this guy do?" Lots of questions, lots of just, "Oh, hey," and just slow them the fuck down.
Yeah. And okay, so I had a game personally where I do that a lot. I completely agree, Josh. Being apologetic and being like, "Oh, I don't know your army. Can you just explain this to me?" Like,
Yep, exactly.
I'm dumb on this. Like, can you show me that rule so I could read it while you're still doing your thing? That way I'm not taking up any of your time. Like, can I read your codex while you're moving so that, A, I'm learning everything about their model. I'm learning its movement. I'm learning its shooting. I'm learning everything I need to know from a competitive standpoint. But I'm also doing it, I'm not taking up their time that they're using for moving or doing other things. And then also, like, you're on a clock, because I played that game on the clock, the last game of the Michigan GT. I actually played a couple of them on the clock. But when you're on the clock, asking questions, do it on your time. And don't be afraid, like, during their movement, to hit the clock so it goes to your time, and then ask your question, because at least it shows them that your question is, you're willing to put your question on your own time. And
Right.
it might back them off, because if you ask a lot of questions, I mean we're all playing with toys and we're all different people with different personalities. That can cause anxiety if you're already on the clock and you have to stop doing what you're thinking about doing, which is moving, to answer a question, and it could come off like you're trying to weed out their time. But if you just do that little aspect of, okay, I'm asking questions on my time, and then you flip it back and let them move. Or even, like, if they seem okay about it, then flip it to your time, ask your question, and let them move while you're asking your question to give them a little extra time. But if they're that guy, and that's a good topic we can touch on real quick, what are things that you will let get away with when you're playing a fun player that you don't let get away with when you're playing a bad player?
Extra scoring of objectives.
Okay.
If they're 4 inches away from an objective marker in a fun game, in a nothing game, okay, yeah, you scored it. Go ahead.
All right, you're close enough. No biggie.
Yeah. In a tournament game where everybody's measuring every half inch and whatnot, and they know they're 4 inches away, and they even bring it up. Negative. Rules is written 3 inches. Sorry. You knew that going in. You could have taken the chart or the advanced movement instead and gotten your extra inch.
Yeah. And that brings up a trick I try to use too, is when people are in the movement phase, pay attention to how far they are away. Because like, they're going to move a unit. Say I'm playing against an orc player, and he's a little on the iffy side. I haven't picked out yet if he's someone who's trying to pull one over on me or not. And he moves a unit. I'll just ask, well, how far away? Because I think he's going to try and charge later. How far away is your unit from me? Then you'll be like, oh, they can move 6. They're 18 inches away now, so they'll be 12 inches away.
5.
Yeah. That way, when they go to roll the charge and they're like, oh, I need a 5 on this charge, I'd be like, no, in the movement phase, you said you were 18 inches away. You said you were 18 inches away. Your model moves 6 inches. How do you only need a 5-inch charge now? Because it puts it on them to justify their own words to you and not justify what's on the table. Because they could move things in a funky way, and then when you call a judge, then they could be all like, oh, the table, and the judge only has the aspects of what he can see in front of him at that moment. He doesn't see everything that goes on during the game. So little things like that you could pick up and use, I think, are helpful.
So one that I have that it's not very well, a lot of guys will not agree with this, but like I said, it depends on the player, right? If he's been in the circuit for a while, absolutely not. But if it's a noob, because for some reason in a lot of brackets, I play like people that are under 18, brand new to the hobby. So the leeway that I would give would be like, say they forget to move a flyer during the movement phase and they're in their shooting phase. I've allowed that to happen. I won't allow it to happen to a seasoned player because you should know the phases.